G'day, I'm Rod. I'm the minister of Emerald Presbyterian Church. Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining us for our Good Friday message this year. My hope this Good Friday is that from the comfort of your own home, you will be comforted with the knowledge that God does love you. Jesus' death, the thing that we focus on this time of year, is a truly tragic tale, but he was never out to save himself. Jesus died to save you. I want to focus with you on Jesus' death, his crucifixion, but I'm going to zero in particularly on the experience of the criminals that were put to death either side of him on their own crosses, because each of them in their own way found comfort in the manner of Jesus' death. Luke chapter 23 verses 35 to 46. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "If he saved others, let him save himself, if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And when he had said this, he breathed his last. This passage reminds me in some ways of a game that we played in the playground in my primary school. Maybe you've played it as well. The game is Stacks On. Here's what it was, if you're not familiar. You choose a victim, you cry "Stacks On" while you tackle them to the ground, and that's the cue for everyone in earshot to also yell out "Stacks On" while they join the pile with the victim at the very bottom. In some ways it was sort of a vehicle of mob justice, because if one person seemed to be getting a bit big for their boots or a bit smug, everyone was happy to pile on in a big heap to put them at the bottom where they belong. Jesus' crucifixion is sort of a deadly game of stacks on, with Jesus at the bottom. First there's Judas. He sells Jesus out to the chief priests, and they've been against Jesus for ages, so this is their cue to cry, "Stacks on." The temple guards working for the priests, when they arrest Jesus, they put the boot in. They hand him over to Pilate, who at first resists to play along, but in the end Pilate is too weak when an angry mob joins the cry. The Roman soldiers flog Jesus, and then spectators gather to insult him. The thing about a Stacks On is that it's a game that's usually initiated by a couple of boisterous boys, but it's also a chance for the weak to put their boot in right at the end. In Jesus' case, even one of the criminals being executed beside him chime in with abuse. If anyone was going to find solidarity with Jesus and empathise with his cause and feel his pain, you would expect it to be one of the crooks who are in the same shoes as Jesus. Luke tells us that one of them says this, "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." Did you notice how he actually had just mimicked the same words as the sneering rulers in verse 35 and the soldiers of verse 37, when all of them, one after the other, say, "Save yourself"? Criminal number one has just parroted this same idea that if Jesus really was a saviour figure, then he should begin by saving himself. He seems to think that if Jesus is king, he ought to live some sort of lavish lifestyle, feathering his own nest for his own comfort. Where does criminal number one find comfort on Good Friday? It's within himself, somehow. Even while he's hanging on a cross for his sins, the guy is brimming with self-righteousness. Probably to him, Jesus' silence looks like weakness. He thinks to himself, I might be about to die, but at least I'm going out like a man. He might have thought, gee, Jesus must be pretty stupid to be accepting this punishment for something he didn't do. I mean, I might be a criminal, but at least I'm not an idiot. So criminal number one finds comfort from within. Here's a perfect example of how self-righteousness can blind a person. How self-righteousness can cause someone to double down on smugness and pride, even right up to the point of their own death. But criminal number two finds comfort somewhere else. Luke tells us how criminal number two turns to Jesus for comfort at the very end. This guy seems to be so affected by Jesus' suffering that he sees in Jesus this thing that everyone else has pointed out, but no one else has seemed to see. That Jesus wasn't going to save himself. He was never going to save himself. But this guy seemed to see that Jesus wasn't going to save himself, not because Jesus couldn't save himself, but because that was never his plan. Jesus didn't come to save himself. Jesus came to save sinners. Jesus came not for his own comfort, but to comfort those who weep. He came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom. Jesus, by his own will, was the sacrificial lamb who gave up the comforts of glory so that you and I might be forgiven. The criminal says to Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus turns to him and says, "Truly, today you will be with me in paradise." Now that's comfort. My hope is that while we reflect today on Jesus' death, we will be reminded that comfort doesn't come from within. It doesn't come from making comparisons that only favour yourself. That's the game for fools and bullies like criminal number one. Instead, be comforted by Jesus' obvious strength and love that he poured out for you on the cross. Everyone had it wrong. Jesus didn't save himself because that was never his plan. Jesus died to save you. I'm going to pray. Feel free to join in. Father in heaven, help us to see in Jesus' death both strength and love. Help us to treasure his sacrificial love for us. Give us the humility to escape the trap of self-righteousness, and give us hearts that follow the only righteous one. Amen. Hey, look, it's good news in some ways for the criminal at the end, bad news at the end of Good Friday for Jesus. He loses his life. But Good Friday isn't the end of the story. On Easter Sunday, we're going to gather the only way we know how these days. We're going to get together online on Zoom at 9:30 Easter Sunday. If you've got kids, you're welcome to join in with them from 9 o'clock. We're going to do a special Easter message with them and give them a chance to wave and say g'day to each other. You can find the link for that on our Facebook page. But look, I hope that Good Friday brings you comfort this year. Thanks.